Hello, everybody. I'm Jeremy McGovern. I'm the conference director for the International Hoof-Care Summit and want to welcome you to this live discussion. And going to give you a little tips about getting around Cincinnati for the Hoof-Care Summit, but I'm thrilled to death about who's on with me, and I'm thrilled to death that he's coming to the summit. He's going to lecture for us the first time, and he might be one of the hardest working horseshoers in Texas, and we might have him be the hardest working farrier at the summit this year. Welcome, Blane.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And we got a few things to go over with Blane. We got him doing a few lectures, and I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and talk about those. And we'll kind of go through these in the order that Blane's going to have them. And the first is we're going to see him Wednesday morning. So as soon as you get there, the summit is Tuesday, January 24th. Through the 27th. So the Wednesday, right before the trade show opens, you get to see Blane. And I think what's good about having him is we're going to have some really good practical insight on stuff. So you get a good balance this year of theory and science, but also practical ideas you can maybe take home and work in with your horses. So Blane, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your the presentation you're going to do on heel pain?
Well, you hit a good point talking about theory versus evidence-based stuff. When we're horseshoers, we're theory-based practitioners. So a lot of things there's only so many things you can do to a horse's foot, leverage, tension, pressure, protection, support. Some horses need one of those things. Some of them need two of those things. Some of them need three of those things. Some of them need all five of those things, if you want to put it in a kind of a perspective, if you will. So, I work on a lot of many guys that are going to be at the summit, just like most horseshoers. I mean, some people have a niche practice where they work on hunter jumpers, they work on reiners, they work on rope horses, and some people have a pretty mixed practice. And all of us at some point are going to encounter a horse that has some type of caudal heel pain, whether it's from lack of maintenance, whether it's from improper trimming and improper shoe placement, whether it's from genetic situations that have to be addressed from a mechanical standpoint as well as a systemic standpoint, i.e. coffin joint injections, navicular burst injections, whatever kind of, maybe a steroid or some kind of anti-inflammatory agent that helps them respond positively to a certain protocol or certain treatment. So I'm going to talk about what we do every day, how different types of heel pain require different types of mechanics, because that's basically what we do as horseshoers. We really don't want to know about all the little things in between. Some of us do. However, most of us want to say, okay, what's the problem? Here's the problem. He's got crushed heels. He's got a quarter crack. He's got a broken bar. He's got a navicular syndrome, whether it's, i.e. the navicular bone has a lesion on it, a medial lateral collateral ligament problem, big flexor problem. What's our problem? Sometimes we can pinpoint, sometimes we can't. However, where's this horse sore, and what are we going to do to try to mechanically address this problem to eliminate as much of the pain as we can for this horse to be able to perform the peak level of performance that he can without doing it in a way where it's going to cause damage down the road. Our whole point is to find a good maintenance program that we can keep on and continue with and stay focused on, in order for this horse to actually become more sound, become more better, and have, like Mark Caldwell always says, form follows function. And so get his foot to be in the right shape, in the right position where it can start to function better, where it can start to heal itself, whether it can start to regrow a foot like we would like to see on that particular individual. So that's what I'm going to be addressing. I'm going to be addressing those things from my perspective on what I do in my part of the country with the kind of horses that I deal with, and how I would approach those problems with different mechanical applications, whether it be with a bar, with a support plate, with a support plate in conjunction with some urethane materials that we have on the market, whether it's with an elevation, how I would deal with the elevation, why I would use different products in conjunction with that elevation when I don't feel like the elevation is going to create problems in the heel area. So those are all the things that I'm going to touch base on based on my approaches, my experiences, and my theories.
And
that I've stolen from everybody else in the world.
yeah. Now, Blane, you've been to a lot of events. We often see you at the American Farriers Association convention each year, and you go to these presentations. You're a presenter yourself. When you're there in the audience and you see these practical informations, how do you balance? How do you evaluate when you watch a presentation to pull out something and give it a try into your practice? How do you keep that open mind?
That's a great question, and I understand from a presenter's perspective how difficult it is to put these things together in a way that a horseshoer can relate to what you're doing. Maybe it gives them confirmation. And I always think, man, this is old news. Everybody knows this, because there really hadn't, since the Heart Bar shoe, there hasn't been really anything that's just been a wow, creative, innovative thing that has come about that's not stuff that was written in the 1800s. So, so I think, man, that's just old news. Everybody knows about it. What I failed to remember is that everybody has their own experiences, and everyone also it's a revolving door. We've got young kids coming in, younger farriers, younger generation coming in who have learned things differently, have seen things on the internet that maybe don't have the practical experience. A lot of them aren't. I don't mean this bad. A lot of them aren't really horse people. They get into farrier and horseshoeing because they enjoy it. They like the horses. They like the building the shoes. They like the mechanical hands-on aspect of it. However, you can't get that stuff off the internet. You can get it and see it, but you actually have to put your hands on it, and you have to actually get in there and do it so you can understand it. So I've realized that when these guys are up there giving those talks, they're giving me, and I'm not looking for the big thing. The big things are pretty simple. We all know, a lot about trimming feet, shaping shoes, those sort of things. It's the little things that someone might say that is like, you know what, that's something that I've forgotten about, or that's something that is a really interesting point that I should know, but I never thought about it like that. So Dr. Turner did a talk on navicular syndrome at the AFA convention. It was just absolutely phenomenal. It was a really great talk. And I got a lot of things out of that. And I want to revisit it so I can get back to them. So what I do is I look at those individuals, and I know that they didn't get there by accident. And so they have something to offer. And and maybe they are saying the same thing, however they present it in a way where it's easier to understand, whether it's more of a light bulb came on in my head when you said that. I've heard people talk about that, but I didn't realize that's what he meant. And so, yeah, those are the things that I take out of those talks. And I'll be honest with you, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. We think, man, I don't really have time to go, and I've got stuff to do. I'd rather be roping. And I go, oh, well, okay. They asked me to go, so I'm going to go. And then I get there, and I'm like, wow, man, I'm glad I didn't miss this opportunity. I'm so glad that I came. I'm so glad that, man, I met this one person that helped me in this area. I met this one guy that had this idea. And it's never failed when I've gone to anything. And I've never been to the summit. And I'm so glad that I've got the opportunity since y'all asked me, because I'd have been just like a lot of guys. I probably wouldn't have gone, but I'm looking so forward to it. I've always wanted to go. And this may have been what it took to get me to finally come, just to take out of my schedule, which I think we all should do, because I've never gone and not received some valuable information from it and met some awesome people.
We're just over the moon that you're coming. This is something Jeff and I have talked about for years, about having you there. And then COVID kind of set us back, but better late than never. But you brought up a point. And so many people, I think, especially after COVID, when people started spending more time with their horses. In my time of year, I've never seen farriers busier than now, but it's hard to grow your business without continuing education, and you can't sit at home and be isolated. So how do you balance? How do you plan so you can get to the convention or you get to the summit and make sure your clients are taken care of, but you're able to take those days off and be away from your practice?
I think that's something that all farriers struggle with, because we're afraid that, oh man, I got to get them done. And here's the thing is, I do it just like I schedule my horseshoe appointments. So I do not schedule my clients ahead of time. Some people do. Some people in different parts of the country. That's why this is such a niche-oriented business. Some people have their clients on a schedule every 6 weeks, every 5 weeks. They do this, they do this. They know where they're going to be. They know how many horses. I couldn't tell you within 500 horses how many horses I've got on my book. I don't reschedule people. I used to have a secretary that did it all. But to answer your question before I get off on a squirrel moment, is I just tell those people, look, I'm not going to be able to get you in until the 28th of January. And so that's my first available opening. They don't know what you're doing. And it's not really any of their business what you're doing. They don't know that you're not shoeing horses all day. And plus, this is what I've learned. It creates a desire and a need for your service. And they're like, man, he's so busy. I got to call him ahead of time, or blah, 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 blah. And so I just so when I go to the summit, it's just like an appointment for me. It's that week I'm booked. I'm booked full. So I've got to be, I can't get you in this day. I've got this guy. If you need some help, give me a call. I'll make sure that he can get a shoe stuck back on. Of course, I never lose shoes, so I don't know. But I make sure that they have somebody that can take care of those needs if they need somebody. And luckily, since I have been involved in associations and have been involved with continuing education, I have a lot larger network of people that I can trust, that I can depend on, that I don't have to worry about. I'm never worried about somebody stealing my business or my customers. I feel like if that's the case and they're going somewhere else, that's not really my customer anyway. And there's always one to take their place. And I'm not taking it lightly. However, that's the way I do it. I just schedule it in, and the people that are really my 20% of our customers are 80% of our income. So those 20% of people, I really try to make sure they know, and we get it all scheduled in beforehand. And if not, I've got 2 guys that work for me. I got a young kid that's really, really good, and I can kind of walk him through situations if I need to. So there's plenty of people that I have in my network of farriers that I can have take care of my stuff when I'm gone. But I schedule it in just like I have an appointment. And so whenever they call me on Monday and it's the 23rd or Monday, and then I've got to be gone on the 23rd to the 27th or whatever, I just say, man, I'm not going to be able to get you until the 28th at noon. And they're like, can't give me any before that? Well, I can get you in the day before I leave, but it's going to have to be at this time at my shop, or other than that, then you're going to have to wait a week. And most of the time, a week, if you got them, most people are getting them, that's not going to make a huge difference on any kind of, and I haven't found. So that's how I do it. I just schedule it in like their appointments and like it's part of my work week, and I treat it that way. And it makes it easier on my mind. I can justify it easier, and it makes me feel better about taking off and not, because those people are going to be there when you get back. It's not like a convenience store that if you close the doors, you're not ever going to get that customer again that day. Most of our customers, they're going to be with us. They're going to stick with us. They trust us. They believe in us. So if they're a week out, they're going to wait, and they're going to make it happen a week later. And so you still really haven't lost that income. It's just been moved to a different week. So that's the way I look at it.
Oh, good. All right. Well, you brought up the heart bar, and this is where kind of our conversation started about having you come and give everybody a bit of a background. Dr. Frank Gravely of Life Data Labs, who we sadly lost last year, many years ago came to Frank Lessiter and said he wanted to honor his friend Blane Chapman in some way at the International Hoof-Care Summit. So we created the Blane Chapman Memorial Lecture, brought to you by Life Data Labs, and no one else this year other than Blane Chapman doing that presentation. So, again, we're thrilled to have you and honored that you're willing to do that talk. What do you have planned for us?
First of all, I'd like to thank Frank Gravely because, I really didn't. I was actually wondering how that memorial came about because, there's a lot of young farriers out there today. They never met Blane Chapman. They just kind of know about his legacy, and there's a lot of the older generation of farriers out there and people in the industry that knew him and had been around him. And so, what It's easy to want to give a talk and a lecture on how to do this or how we do this. This year, I'm going to try to make it a little more about the man, who he was, kind of reintroduce him to the younger generation, what he was about, how he got started, what happened in the beginning, how they came about utilizing the heart bar shoe versus all the other methods that everyone was trying that they weren't working. A lot of it had to do with not understand the physics and anatomy of the foot, which Bernie was very well read and well versed in anatomy and physiology of the foot and how it worked, how it functioned, and so I'm gonna touch base on that. I'm gonna incorporate what happens when a horse has founder laminitis with some schematics and stuff. That if anybody watched my COVID lecture on founder laminitis, you'll see some of those schematics again. Basically the same way. I'm just gonna put them in a different perspective and just rediscuss how, reiterate to people what happens inside the foot, show them some schematics that really have a very vivid visual picture of what's happening during that time, how we came about, how Bernie came about the utilization of the heart bar shoe, some of the crazy things that happened in the beginning, how the hoof resection came into play, the products that have evolved from that shoe that I think a lot of people don't realize that that evolved just because of that shoe and people's mindset, because they went to clinics, they went to seminars, they got around people because in the beginning, there wasn't any internet. There wasn't any way to gather information except for someone who's had the experience, for one, or books that were written in the late 1800s. And so really no one knew how to, they were kind of on their own, and everybody was scratching their head trying to find a way, and nothing seemed to really work. And for whatever reason, whenever they decided about the heart bar shoe and what it was used for was totally different than what they ended up using it for. Then all of these different products came on the market that we utilize today, and they all stem from the heart bar shoe. And I'll discuss those products and the different ways that we are approaching treating founder laminitis from a mechanical perspective now versus what it was like in the beginning, from a heart bar shoe to wrapping their feet, to how to pack their feet, to the products we use in their feet, to the development of the hospital plate, to the development of the clog, to the development of the ultimate wedges, and all the different things that we argue about on what works and what doesn't. And then I'll show some horses that we've worked on that have been successes and failures, and try to examine why those worked and why they didn't. And so it just talked about the man, the myth, the legend, if you will. And it was and reintroduce people to Bernie and who he was and what he was all about as a person, as a farrier, as a friend, as a humanitarian.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing is, as Dennis Manning presented on last year at the AFA convention, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, and to give an appreciation of how far we've come and where we still have to go, I think it's important to look at the people who a lot of these foundations were built on. So I should say we have a couple new people joining us. If you have any questions for Blane, if you want to learn a little bit more about his presentations, stuff that we're not talking about, or if you have any questions about how he runs his practice there in Texas, feel free to type that in. He'd be happy to share some information. And we got a couple other things to go over, and feel free to type those in. There's a Q&A field, there's a chat field, and I'll look at those if you send those in, and we'll get those taken care of. But moving on, we have you in a breakout. And this year we're doing somewhat of an interesting breakout of looking at horseshoeing from a regional perspective. The principles I think hold true, but there's always some things that are a little bit different about practices and the types of horses and the location. And we have a friend coming from Australia to talk about where he works. We have Dr. Castilian's coming this year, and he's going to talk about some stuff he's seeing over in Europe that hasn't quite made it over here yet. And Blane, we have you talking about the 4-6s. what are you going to get? You're going to give us a tour and talk about your work there?
Yeah, I hope to. I'm getting all that stuff put together still, I'm trying to get it all together. It's been a really good ride for me. It's an interesting place. It's a ranch that's in the past is like no other. There are guys out there that do big breeding farms and stuff that have a lot of horses. Dusty Franklin, who works at Lazy E, and they do a lot of mares there. And the 4.6s are a little bit the same way as far as all the recip mares, all the colts. They'll keep 1,000 to 1,200 head of horses there at different times of year during breeding season. So it's crazy. They probably have anywhere from 300 to 500 head of horses there year round. Between the mares that they have, the geldings that they have, the yearlings, the sale prep colts. And so I'm just going to go through, I think a lot of people want to see what it's like, what the place is. And so I'll go through and kind of show some videos of the complex and how many stalls are there, how many pastures are out there, and how they run the horses in and out and bring them up. And when we have big numbers to work on, how our team manages those and how we have to treat those horses and handle them so that they're taken care of properly and we can do the proper kind of hoof care. And it's going to be interesting because it's definitely not for the weak hearted. It can be a tough gig, but we do everything there we do every kind of horse there that you can imagine as far as foot problems, good, bad, and ugly. So I'm just going to try to go through the 6s and what we do there and talk a little bit about the ranch history and where it was, where it is, and where it's going in the future. So, and what they do there besides just have horses to shoot.
Excellent. So you brought up your team and those of you who are on here who get the magazine, maybe you saw Jeff Coda's article with Blane from a few years ago. You work with a lot of different farriers, and there seems to be a problem right now of finding good help. I don't think that's just limited to horseshoeing, but how do you find young talent? And then once you find somebody to join your practice, how do you train them? How do you build them up? How do you make sure they don't leave right away once you find someone who's good?
First of all, to get them to stay, I pay them more than they're worth at the beginning. And then they start being an asset. And then when they become an asset and they're productive financially for the program, then I try to compensate them accordingly for their skill level. And how I get those guys, luckily for me now, I've been around long enough that there's a lot of people that call me wanting to go get help. And from going to the AFA, being hooked into the continuing education, being hooked into the program certification programs, you get to be around a lot of people, and there's always somebody calling somebody. And usually either somebody doesn't need the help, doesn't want the help, or somebody already has help and they're like, you know what? Let me call this guy. And they'll call me and say, hey, man, I got a guy that wants to learn how to shoe horses. He's a really good guy. I think he'd fit in your deal. You mind if he called you? Yeah, have him call me. And, you can tell pretty quick the ones that are going to make it, the ones that wash out. They wash out pretty quick. But I've been really fortunate. I've always had, people know that I've always had help, and there's something about it that when those guys get better and better, I start letting them venture off on their own and sending them places because people will call me that I really can't get to their horses and I don't have time, or it's not really what I want to do. And so I try to help those customers fill that void where they need a farrier or somebody to take care of their horses. So I can send those guys out when they're learning. And if they make mistakes on those horses, I can kind of go back and back them up, and I can be their parachute a little bit. And so, and it gets those guys better customers. It keeps everybody involved on a better playing field and not getting so much negative feedback from that when those guys make mistakes. And so there's always people out there that are wanting to learn. A lot of times I'll get a hold of a horseshoeing school somewhere and say, hey, do you have anybody that's coming out of horseshoeing school that wants to go ride with somebody or needs they're really interested and they're focused and this is what they want to do. And they'll say, yeah, I got this one guy. And I'll say, well, have him give me a call. And so I'll get them from the horseshoeing schools coming out. And a lot of times, obviously, like always, we're going to retrain them our way. And however, it works out pretty good. And they get the best of both worlds. And then you pay them good. You try to train them where they can, at first, you don't like it. Like the first time I had some good guys and then they wanted to go out on their own, man, I was like aggravated. I'm like, really? I need you now. And I've now built my business around you. And I've got all these extra horses to do. And now I'm stuck by myself. And that's why I'm not afraid to pay them well for what they're doing. And I don't have a pay scale that I make as they climb the ladder. When I feel like that they're doing more work than they're getting paid for and I feel bad about it, then I increase their pay. And it never has failed me yet. It's worked for me. And, there's days that we do less than what they make. And then there's days that we do more than what they make. And so it usually evens out pretty well. But I kind of keep in touch with other farriers in the industry that use help. And I say, hey, man, if you see anybody needing a place to go, let me know. And I've got a bunkhouse here and I've got one of my young guys. He lives in my bunkhouse. And so that works too, having kind of a place for him to stay. So that's how I do it.
Yeah. You brought up what you did, and we had that COVID year, and you helped us out and did some live discussions, did a presentation, and then we're talking about networking. And I think there is a value to continuing education. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing a live session online and talking about things if we didn't think there was a value to it. But I think the big difference maker is that networking. And I'll tell you what, if you come to the summit, any of these events, and you can get time, if you're interested in learning more about running a practice like that, here's a good example. You can talk to Blane and learn a little bit more about his practice. How does he set up to pay people and find that talent? So I don't think we can put a price on networking.
Man, I love talking about it with guys too, because it's funny how a lot of guys, man, I don't see how you get people to bring them to your shop. And the way that I do it is I ask them to. And I sell it. We're salespeople. That's what we are. People don't use us. People use some of us because they feel like that they're doing the best by their horse. However, most of the people use us because they like us and they feel like they're getting a value for what we're giving them. And so that's one thing. And then and just like, I like talking to people about how I've started over 4 different times in my career at different places. And every time I showed up somewhere, they said, man, you'll never get people to bring horses to your shop because they just won't do it. They just won't do it. Well, they'd rather get their horse in their trailer and be a little bit frustrated, but then they would having to stay at their work and their job. They'd rather get their horse and take them to the horseshoe. And then once they get there, they're like, oh man, this is cool. I didn't know that. And another thing, horseshoers were bad about overbooking ourselves. And we're bad about scheduling ourselves where we can't get caught up and then we're behind. We have to change somebody's appointment. If you tell them to be at the shop, they know you're going to be there. They're not having to worry about you standing them up. And so there's all kinds of little things like that I think the farriers can do. And how I charge and how I don't. And that's the hardest thing we do as horseshoers is charging, because we get to be so connected with our customers on a personal level too. And so there's all kinds of ways that I've taken from other horseshoers that I've learned that go to these continuing education things, because obviously they're doing something right. And so I take something from each and every one of those people and I put it in my little filing cabinet and I utilize it whenever I can. So
yeah,
it looks good.
All right. I got a real special announcement for the people on right now, and we can finally get to it. Blane's known a little bit about some of this, but this year we got a special guest coming to the summit, Mr. Chris Cox, the trainer, the horseman, fellow Texan down there with you in the Lone Star State. And I'll take everybody back. this is the 20th annual Hoof-Care Summit, and we started talking what's something that we can do special for the industry, and talk to our friends at Zoetis and they work with Chris. He's going to come, and this Wednesday night, the Wednesday night at the Hoof-Care Summit, we're going to have a fun little session. Zoetis is going to get everybody a drink, and you'll be able to listen to Chris talk to some other farriers about working in safe conditions, getting horses trained. But after that, for the 20th, we've created an auction, and 100% of these proceeds, every nickel, it's going to be split between three charities. The first is the Injured Farrier Fund of the American Farriers Association, and then the Injured Farrier Fund of the International Association of Professional Farriers, and then Hammers and Heroes, which is a charity run by Joe Santos. Some of you may know him. He's a horseshoer in Connecticut. And this is a charity that gives foraging time to veterans and first responders who have PTSD issues, and honored to be able to help raise some money for that. And again, the hardest working man in Cincinnati that week, Blane, you're going to be our auctioneer.
All right.
I'll tell you what. We've seen Blane do this at the AFA convention. It just happened to line up really well that you're already one of our speakers. I'll tell you what, I've left that auction buying stuff without thinking I was going to buy anything, but there's something about being an auctioneer.
I appreciate it. It's fun. I enjoy it. I'll tell you a little story about Chris Cox. So those of you that don't really know him, or that you have a preconceived view of him, just because the way he's a super intense guy, and he's probably one of the best horsemen on the planet. I mean, he's up there in the top 5, in my opinion. I mean, he would be the first one. Craig Cameron's good. He's a real good friend of mine as well. That Chris Cox is, I actually, how I got to meet Chris Cox, and just a short story, just to kind of give you a little bit of information about him if you don't know him. He didn't really know anything about me as a horse. I think now he does, just because of Lee Olson and Peter Big Buddies, and Lee does a lot of work for him. But I don't think Chris knew really much about me as a horse, except for I shot a horse at the Sixes, and I met him when he had won the first road to the horse, and he'd come to Sixes. And I just shook hands with him one day. Hello, how you doing? And anyway, moving on down later on, I was at a roping in Salado. It's called the Businessman's Roping. It paid a bunch of money. It paid like $37,000 a man. And Chris was there, and I was the highest team back to the average coming in, and Chris was 5th high team back, and we're loping our horse around in the back. And I said, hey, Chris, and we kind of shook hands again and kind of got reacquainted from where we met each other. And he asked me if I was going to this big roping in Reno later in the year. And I said, no, but I've always wanted to go. And so he said, we ought to rope together. And I said, if you're serious, don't just be telling me that, because if you are, I'm in. And he's like, no. So anyway, one thing that led to another. I won that roping that night. And then I ended up meeting up with Chris. We talked back and forth over time. We flew out to Reno, and we roped in the roping out there, and we won second. It paid, by the time it was all over, we won about $67,000 a piece. Chris and I did. So we became really acquainted at that time. We became friends, and it gave me a total different level of respect for him, being around him with horses and just as a person. And he's pretty serious about stuff. I think he's mellowed out a little bit, but man, that guy, you do not want to miss Chris Cox. He's a phenomenal human being, phenomenal horseman, and I think we could all get something from Chris and his story. You can also go to the Gauge podcast. I'm not getting paid for anything, and you can listen to Chris Cox on the Gauge with Chance Conrado, I believe it is. I think that's what his podcast is, but he's really, really good. Yeah. Really good guy. I can't wait for it, and he'll be there on Wednesday. And if you're there at the Hoof-Care Summit, of course, our trade show is on Wednesday and Thursday. So Chris will be there in the Zoetis booth Wednesday morning, and then also Wednesday evening. So if you have ever seen his show, if you've read anything about him, you get a chance to meet him. So another benefit of coming to Cincinnati. But, as a final question, Blane, you mentioned this is your first time coming. What's something you're looking forward to at the Hoof-Care Summit this year? You know what? First of all, Frank Lester, I mean, what a genius of marketing, and having the guys like you and Jeff Coda that have been on his team that have made it such a success. I've always known how good a program it was, just because, I mean, you look and there's information everywhere. You can go this station, this, I don't know how you could get to them all. And it just, all the years that I've always been interested in going that I never have, it's always been in my mind to say, man, I've got to go one year, I've got to go, because just the marketing of it is done so well, and it's not done in a way that it's real, it's for real. And when you look at the marketing and how y'all present it and all of the things that you can learn, all the products that you can see, that's what is so great. When you go there, there's all these products on the market that you don't see in your local feed store when you go to buy different kinds of shoes. I mean, just it's the little things and the people that you meet, and there's so much good information. There's so many good speakers and so many knowledgeable industry professionals that you can go and really, they're not unapproachable. Sometimes people feel like that we're unapproachable because of, that's Craig Turnkill, that's Austin Edens, but really, we're really not unapproachable. And we're a lot of us are probably more introverted than we seem. And so, but once somebody approaches us, we want to talk about it, because what really people don't realize is how much that they have to offer to us, just from different perspectives. Just maybe if it's just a question they ask, that it makes us feel like, hey, I actually gave this guy some valuable information, or this girl some valuable information that she could take home and help her with. And that's the whole point of it all for me. And so I'm excited, because I kind of want to mill around and talk to people and see what I can learn from other people. That's a great thing about it for me. It gives me the opportunity to go and learn and talk to new professionals and people that I don't know, that I've heard about or read about or seen a YouTube video of, that I can go talk to and say, hey man, I saw your video. You know what? That was pretty cool what you did. And how did you do that? Or how do you put that heel check on that? Or how do you make that cop the way you do? Or just those little things like that. So I'm excited because of all of the buildup and the hype going into it. And it seems like it's very real. And when you talk to people that have been, I've never heard anybody that's been to the summit that said, you know what, man, it really was. I mean, most people are like, man, there was so much stuff. I couldn't get to all of it. Most people are like, man, I'm gonna go back next year. Or they call me on the phone, man, are you going to the summit? I want to meet you. I want to see if you're at the summit. Are you going to go? Are you going to go? And so I think there's a lot of people that are excited about being there, and excited about the people that are speaking, and excited about the products and stuff that they can see, the new things that are on the market.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing, whether you go to the convention for the marketplace or International Hoof-Care Summit for the trade show, it's your time to talk to the folks who make the products you use every day. And, like you got the Mustad booth there, you can go talk to Grant. Maybe you bought his tool line. Maybe you got a question about a shoe he did a video about on YouTube. They're there for you. They're not there. Of course, they're trying to push their product, but really, in terms of selling product, we have a lot of suppliers, and whether it's Stockhoff's, Texas Farrier Supply, Nature Farms, but a lot of these businesses there, they give you education on their products.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Mustad, I just recently rejoined the Mustad team, and I'm going to use their products, and I remember back in the beginning when they first started making products, and I look at the products they use now, and I mean they're just great products, and they've done so much for the industry, from the Hoof-Care Summit, the AFA. And if it wasn't for the horseshoers, they wouldn't be in business, and they know that, and that's why they try to give back. And any of the other companies too. I mean, FPD, CareCart, all of them, all of these companies, they know that the horseshoers are the backbone and the lifeline of their business, and so they realize that. And I tell you what, man, since I got back on the team and using the products, and there's a lot of new products they're coming up with, and things that are very compatible with any kind of horseshoe, any kind of forging. That's one thing that I'm trying to do from the Mustad perspective, from my input. I'm trying I'm going to try to bridge the gap for us guys that shoe a lot of horses cold, that don't actually build a lot of shoes. I'm trying to bridge the gap between the two different styles of farrier, because at the end of the day, it's all about the foot being trimmed properly, the shoe being fit properly, regardless of whether it's a conventional factory-made shoe or a beautifully made handmade shoe. I've never seen a horseshoe in my life that was put on properly for the proper reason, for the proper purpose, and cripple a horse. So you can put the most beautifully made shoe or the most beautifully made factory shoe, the best on the market. You put it on improperly, it's not going to do any good. So my goal is, because I'm a little of both. I've got a lot of cold banging in me, and I've got a little tongue pulling in me. So I'm trying to let people know that are out here on the cold banging side, that are afraid to come in here because they're afraid these guys that are building shoes from scratch are attacking them. And I don't think that that's the case. I think that really we're all in here together, and we're all doing the same thing. We're all serving the same purpose, and that's the horse. I mean, we owe our life to the horse, every one of us. I know I do. And so that's what I'm going to try to give back. And I want to try to look at it and try to get these guys that are against throwing a shoe in the forge to maybe start looking into that a little bit. And these guys over here that are just build shoes from scratch, they're never going to pull a factory shoe off the shelf and put it on a horse. Let them realize, hey, it's not the shoe. The beauty of all things lies in its application. And so that's kind of where I am, and I'm excited about being at the summit this year and kind of trying to bridge the gap there as well.
It's a perfect venue for it. I think this year we got more associations exhibiting than we ever had before. Of course, we always have our friends at the AFA, and they're doing their written exam this year. So if you're interested in taking that, that'll be Tuesday morning. The IAPF has been a big supporter of the summit in their 11 years, and they'll be doing a general session meeting on Thursday night. So you'll be able to get there. International Farrier Academy, the Northeast Association of Equine Practitioners. Even this year, we got the British Farriers and Blacksmiths Association coming over. So ELPO, whatever you do, whoever you align yourself with, I think you bring up a great point, Blane. In this industry, sometimes it's a little too fragmented, and realize there may be different ways to get to the destination. There's different roads to take, but in my time, I've never met a farrier who wants to go out and injure a horse. Everybody wants to keep the horse center and in front of mind, and yeah, as you said, they owe their living to it.
Yeah, we all do the best we know how, and that's why I think that it's kind of like religion. If you're gonna be a religious leader, whether you're whatever, I think the best information you can be armed with is know your enemy and know what they're about. So if you don't like one of the different methods of trimming a foot, learn about it. Learn something about it. So whenever you do talk about it, you have a stance. And I think that you'll find that at the end of the day, if you really look into it, we're not that far apart. I mean, none of us are that far apart. And at the end of the day, the horse has a certain set of parameters that his foot's going to go in, and if we can keep that within a 5% margin or less margin of error, most horses are going to get along really well. And like I say, nobody goes out and decides to do a poor job. And and so I think it's a great place to bridge the gap. I think it's a great place to learn new ideas, and you can take with it what you want. You don't have to go home and use it. Take it, learn it, and say, you know what? I have an interesting point there. I'm going to do this because this works better for me here. And we're all in a niche market. A lot of us shoe different types of horses, and I can't shoe a 1D barrel horse the same way that I'm going to shoe a dressage horse. It's just, but the basics are the same. The foot trim's the same. You still have to shape a shoe to what you've trimmed and place your nails in the proper place with it. And you may just leave a little more support here or there. But anyway, it's just all the little things. There's so many different things that we can do and learn from one another. So I'm really excited about coming, and I'll probably learn more than the people that are at my talks, honestly. It's all over the end of the day. So
that's what it's all about. But Blane, I appreciate you coming to the summit, and today I appreciate you taking time off on a Saturday to join us on here and talk about what you're going to do. Looking forward to having you there. And networking, these lectures, the trade show, he's giving you advice that make that time to come to Cincinnati. So again, Blane, thank you.
You're welcome. I really am looking forward to it. I'm especially starting to put my projects together, and like, man, this is going to be, and you want people to get something out of it. That's the whole point. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the program, about the horse, and what we can do for the horse, and my perspective on it. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot of guys that I can talk to afterwards that can give me a lot more insight on some of the things that I can do differently as well.
Absolutely. Well, Blane, thank you. And thank you everybody who joined us on this Saturday to watch. If you missed any of it, or you had to step away from your phone or your computer, we are recording this, and I'll put it up on YouTube and on the American Farriers Journal website, our email. So you'll have to be Stevie Wonder if you miss it. So again, Blane, everybody, thank you for watching, and hope to see you in Cincinnati.